The Ballad of Mr. Budokai by Matt Martinek. He seemed the gentlest of creatures, almost like a cartoon mouse or an Asian Charlie Chaplin, complete with black bowler and cane. His gait was a little awkward, kind of a stutter step on the verge of severe drunkenness, with the cane saving him from the pavement at every curb or crosswalk. You would see this tiny fellow around town, clomping about, minding his own, always with a big smile, which always overshadowed his pencil-thin mustache. He was just one of those characters, the ones whose histories were created for them on the lips of bemused children or bored housewives. I had no issue with him, but my friends, they did. You know how kids are, especially kids in a group. They called us the Three Musketeers around town, as we were never alone. The group consisted of yours truly, Charlie, Ricky, and Dom, which was short for Dominic. Amongst the group, however, Dom was referred to as Dumb instead, which was funny because he was the smartest of the group. Kind of a nerd, really. I guess it's like calling a big fat motherfucker tiny or something like that. Dumb was also skinny as hell and had the reddest hair you could imagine. He always said he was Italian, but I don't know too many Italians with flaming red hair and freckles. The other kids would pick on him constantly, but Ricky and I always had his back. Ricky, on the other hand, he was dumb for real. He was held back in kindergarten and struggled ever since. But the girls loved him and always followed him around school. They always said he was a cutie, and sometimes we would catch him at school in the coat room making out with some starry-eyed little girl. He just had those good genetics. Jet black hair, tan skin, and a little muscle to him, too. As far as good old Charlie goes, well, I was pretty much a nobody. No looks, no smarts, no talent, nothing. Dry as a popcorn fart, invisible as the plague. It was that one particular summer, the summer of '88, when everything started to change. Me and my buddies, we were all 12. That weird puberty shit was kicking in, and we all were getting moody as fuck. Every day felt like 1,000 degrees outside, and boredom was always the enemy. Unfortunately, in an attempt to ease our testosterone-fueled frustrations, our friends began to turn their attention to Mr. Budokai. It started innocently enough with Ricky and Dumb making noises toward the man and flipping him off as we passed, but it progressed as the heat of the summer intensified. I was never one to pick on a person. It just didn't feel right. But as they say, peer pressure is a bitch. So I followed, as a lamb to slaughter. The act that pushed things over the edge took place at the fruit market downtown. We saw Mr. Budokai there nearly every Saturday, and Ricky told me they had a plan. I didn't like the sound of it one bit, and I tried to get them to go with me to see the new Freddy Krueger movie instead, but they wouldn't have it. I tried to make up excuses why I couldn't go, but my friends knew me too well. "Oh, come on, Chuck. Why you gotta be such a pussy about it? You got a hard on for this weirdo or something?" Ricky had such a way with words. God love him. I was stuck. The night before this plan was supposed to take place, I thought at length about this mysterious fellow and all of the stories I'd heard about him. There were so many possibilities floating around. That he was retarded, that he was an ex-ninja, that he had bodies buried in his backyard, or that he might even be some sort of war hero from his native country. All bullshit, I was sure. But I just wished my friends hadn't taken an interest in harassing this person that we really knew nothing about. I even asked my parents what his deal was, and neither of them had the slightest clue. It seemed Mr. Budokai was a puzzle no one could solve. That Saturday started out with a lump in my throat because I was nervous as hell. I didn't know what was going to happen. My only hope was that Budokai would simply not show. Unlikely, but not impossible. My friends and I made it to the market at around noon, and to my relief, our target was nowhere to be seen. I tried to speed up the process and suggest some other dastardly things to do on such a beautiful sunny day, but Dumb just replied, "Don't worry. He'll be here. He's always here." So we waited and watched. Fate would have it no other way, it seemed. At around 1, we spotted the little fella stumbling his way up the street about a block away. The largest smile grew upon Ricky's face, and he walked away from us into the vendor's stands. "Where the hell is he going?" I asked. Dumb replied, "To get ammunition, of course. It's gonna get messy." I watched Ricky as he bought a bunch of tomatoes, put them into a plastic bag, and quickly made his way back to us, grinning uncontrollably. Fuck. So this was their plan. Everything seemed in slow motion as Mr. Budokai neared the market. Step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat. Ricky and Dumb each took a few tomatoes as they perched behind one of the stands, like snipers in wait. I stayed a few steps behind. I wanted no part of it. Even at that moment, I didn't think Ricky or Dumb had enough balls to go through with it. Just as that thought entered my mind, Ricky yelled, "Hey, Budokai, you weird little fuck, check this out." A tomato sailed through the air as Budokai froze in mid-step and spotted the little red orb coming for him. Sploosh! Right on his black vest it smashed, as everyone at the market looked in his direction. The man made eye contact with us, but his smile never wavered, which I thought was the strangest thing. The singular tomato opened up the floodgates as Ricky and Dumb pelted the man with more and more. The tomato entrails engulfed this poor man, and everyone started to laugh. Dumb motioned to me and yelled, "Come on, you pussy!" I wanted to walk away, but I didn't. I came up behind my friends, put my hand in the bag, and pulled out the largest, juiciest tomato I could. One would be enough, just so they couldn't say I wussed out. I cocked my arm back and whaled that fucker right at the little man. Unfortunately, my aim was a little different than my friend's. My tomato hit Mr. Budokai square in the face with a force that knocked him to the ground and sent his bowler cap into the street. His face was drenched in the gooey juice and dripping seeds, mixed with a bit of blood, I'm sure. And everything stopped. The laughter stopped. Hell, there was no sound at all. There were just the stares of the people, including my friends, aimed squarely at me. Mr. Budokai sat there, frozen, looking quite the mess, and stared at me as well. But again, somehow, his smile remained. I ran from the market with the speed that could only be born of embarrassment and shame. My legs burned like fire as tears streamed down my cheeks the whole way to my house. I could not believe what I had done, but I also cursed the kind of luck that would allow my action over everyone else's to turn a prank into something more. My parents knew that I was upset, but there was no way I could tell them what happened. How could I have been so stupid? I didn't want anything to do with it, but I took part anyways. I hurt that man, and he had done absolutely nothing to me. For the entire week after, I kept replaying the event over and over again in my mind. I wanted to take it back, to somehow make amends. I didn't want any part of the Musketeers either. Those fools were the ones who got me into this whole thing in the first place. They kept calling me on the phone, but I told my mom I didn't want to talk, that they were no longer my friends at all. I just sat in my room alone with the guilt. What could I do? It would take some nerve and a whole lot of balls, but I settled on making an apology to Mr. Budokai. I had to. It was simply the right thing to do. I knew where he would be on Saturday if he weren't too embarrassed. Again at the market. I would follow him until we got away from the crowd and tell him how sorry I was. That it just got out of hand. It was my only option. And so the day came. And just like the weekend before, that same lump in my throat appeared, but with nervousness that was much stronger and debilitating this time around. I was sweating and my hands were shaking. I did not want to face this man. Not just because I was embarrassed, but because the guy was strange as fuck and I didn't know how he would react. For all I knew, he could bop me with his cane and beat the living shit out of me. Still, I probably deserved it. I made my way to the market, thinking of what I would say and how I would approach him, dreading the moment. Budokai was not there yet, so I set up shop. Another sniper in waiting. It seemed forever, and my heart beat faster and faster, with my nerves as raw as a rotting tooth. And eventually, there he was, waddling up the street. I felt like I was going to have a fucking heart attack. I stood by, out of sight, and watched him as he began to browse. He was so polite to everyone he came in contact with, and always with that damn grin. Another thing I did notice, however, was a small bandage on the bridge of his nose, remnants of my stupidity. After about a half hour, he finished up his shopping and made his way up the street with a few bags of groceries. I followed, about 10 yards behind. It was the moment of truth. As I continued behind this man, my curiosity began to get the best of me. All of these stories about Budokai began to enter my mind. Were any of them true? I could have approached him and apologized right away, but something told me to keep following. Where on earth does a man like this live? What of his family? Is it a nice house? I was going to find out. Mile followed mile, and just as I was getting ready to abort the mission, Budokai stopped at the gate of what was apparently his home. The house was meager, yet well kept and clean looking. A two-story brick, more than enough for one person. The yard was perfect. Flowers and shrubbery out front. Nothing stood out. A part of me was disappointed. What a usual surrounding for such an unusual man. And so, with my heart in my throat, I yelled, "Mr. Budokai!" He was startled and actually dropped his bags. I quickly went up to him, and he looked afraid for a moment until I spoke. "I'm Charlie, and I'm that idiot who hit you with that tomato last week. It was a stupid prank, and I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. I was going along with my friends, and things just got out of hand." I was relieved to get this off my chest. I waited for what seemed like a lifetime for some type of response as he stared at me confusedly. But then, it came. "Ah, Charlie! Apology accepted. Believe it or not, I was that age once too. I have to say, you cut me up pretty good on the nose here." He pointed at his bandage. His accent was nearly non-existent, but you could still tell he wasn't born in the States. "I'm sorry, sir. I guess my aim was a little off," I retorted. "Oh, no. I'd say it was dead on." Budokai laughed, as did I. "Do me a favor, my son. Make an old man happy. Come inside and have some tea with me." He seemed so genuine with his words. I smiled at the old man, picked up his bags, and followed him inside. There was a warmth about Mr. Budokai. It felt like I was talking to my grandfather. So there we sat at Mr. Budokai's kitchen table, sipping tea and talking about everything and anything. He was one of the nicest men I had ever talked to. Had a sense of humor, too, which is rare for an older fella. I was glad that things had gone so well. "I have to say, you always seem so happy. You always have that smile on your face. Even when my friends and I were making fun of you, you still smiled at us. How do you keep your cool?" I had to know his secret. "Oh, Charlie, don't mistake the smile for happiness. I simply smile because I can't frown. You see, back in the war, all those years ago, I was shot in the neck and the bullet destroyed some nerves. The damage was quite severe. It entered at the neck and lodged into my face. Now my smile cannot be wiped off." A tear fell down the man's cheek as he said this. My eyes redirected to his neck as I did spot the remnants of a scar. Apparently he had seen battle, like some of the stories I'd heard about him. "But don't fret. I did my duty, and I do have my share of medals and trophies." Budokai's eyes gleamed as he spoke of his victories. "I must show you, Charlie. Come see what I have done. I have it all set up." Budokai already started for the stairs, and I must admit, I was intrigued. I followed my new friend up the stairs, but as I began to climb, I noticed a particular scent, almost like a piece of rotten food that was forgotten about. Mr. Budokai climbed the stairs excitedly, almost to the point of perfect health. The cane no longer seemed necessary. At the top of the stairs, he showed me into his bedroom. Everything was neat and tidy, unlike the conditions your regular bachelor would keep. He pointed towards the wall, and I did not understand what he was trying to show me. It was just a stark, white wall. What was this? A joke? Mr. Budokai slid his fingers around the left side of the wall, and I heard a barely audible click. As he was doing this, I noticed the scent of rot growing, almost burning my nostrils. I was becoming more than uneasy. Something was wrong. He slid the facade of the wall aside, and I could not believe what I saw. Lined up in 2 rows on shelves resided 6 shrunken, mummified heads. The hideous smell rocked me backwards as my eyes attempted to take in the grisly sight of these skulls. The writhing looks of pain, the differing states of decay, the stringy white hairs that reminded me of the silk of a corn cob. I believe I was screaming, but I don't know for sure. It was also very surreal. As I attempted to get my bearings, I noticed the shelving underneath the heads. 6 matching pairs of shriveled, twisted hands. "See, Charlie? My trophies. These men were great, but I was greater. And look, I have some recent additions." Mr. Budokai gestured towards the corner of this hidden room, where I saw my friends. There, in the dim light, I could make out the faces of Ricky and Dumb, both in their own container of pale green liquid, streaked red from whatever blood was still present. Their features were distorted, their mouths frozen in their screams, but it was definitely them. It was at that very moment that my bowels let loose and I messed my pants. I looked at Mr. Budokai, whose smile had transformed into something a bit more ghastly and devious. "Charlie, it seems you have dirtied yourself." Budokai chuckled as he raised his cane and brought it down onto my head with a great deal of force. I fell to the floor in disbelief of the situation. I knew I was bleeding badly. I could feel the warmth drip from my scalp. I was dizzy, but still conscious. So with all the strength I had for a boy of 12, I rushed the old man, knocking him down in the process. I ran/fell down the stairs and busted out of his door into the street. My legs were on fire again, with tears streaming down my face. I sprinted home, covered in my own filth, with the visual of my friends' decapitated heads floating through my mind. When everything was said and done, the police found Mr. Budokai waiting patiently at the bus stop with his everlasting grin still stretched across his face. As they approached him, he asked only about his newfound friend. "How is Charlie? I hope his head is all right. Such a good boy he is."